Okay, we are live after probably half a year of something of not having Ask Me Anything sessions. We are back, and today we have Ivan from Fiberplane to help answer anything related to observability. Ivan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, yeah. So I'm Ivan from Fiberplane, currently head of solutions engineering. And Fiberplane do collaborative notebooks for SREs and got an open source observability framework as well, very developer focused. But also I spent kind of 15 years in the monitoring observability space, mainly at kind of large financial institutions, banks, dealing with some pretty big global systems and some pretty scary incidents. So yeah, that's me. Hello, thank you for having me on.
Brilliant. Let's start. We already have a question, and this is a good probably at the very beginning. I don't know where to start, but here it goes. What is a turnkey solution for observing Kubernetes clusters? I suspect there is no turnkey solution, but I'll give you even the baton.
Yeah, I mean, there is one obvious tool that is used in terms of monitoring Kubernetes in general. Prometheus being the kind of the standard tool to use, but I'm not sure there is a good kind of turnkey solution. I think this is kind of part of the problem of using this technology, right? But yeah, I mean, I guess you're probably maybe a little bit further along with Kubernetes than me. What's your opinion?
I mean, there are different there are a couple of turnkey solutions. Like, I mean, more than a couple of projects that contain everything. Very often, those projects would combine things and then maybe put a cherry on top. But I would say that there are probably five. Somebody needs to think about, right? First, how you generate data, which would be probably OpenTelemetry today, and then almost everything supports it. And then once you start generating that data and instrumenting code, then maybe you can talk about the project we commented before the stream. So you're generating data, right? Your Kubernetes cluster is generating data, and then if you instrument your applications are generating data, and that's in OpenTelemetry format. And then we have three types of. I mean, you can use something like Elasticsearch and say everything goes there, which I don't think it's a great solution. The alternative is to have different, can I call it storages? And say, okay, this is where metrics go, this is where logs go, and this is where traces go, right? Metrics, Prometheus, as you mentioned. Prometheus or a variation of Prometheus. There are other solutions like Victorian metrics when you want to scale Prometheus, but it's Prometheus compatible, if not Prometheus, right?
Yeah.
Something for traces, you want to figure out what's happening with your requests, and Jaeger maybe, or Grafana temp or something like that. And finally, logs. My vote for logs goes to either use a SaaS solution of your provider or Loki.
Yeah.
And then there is the last, and you're going to like this because you can probably talk much more about it than me. The last part is that, okay, once you put all that together and put some maybe dashboard like Grafana and alerts that will notify you the things, when the things happen, right? How do we do the last mile? How do we do post-mortem and figure out what happened, and how do we prevent that from happening in the first place?
Yeah. So, I mean, as we said, kind of, I think if you're literally just looking for the K8 clusters themselves, nothing else, then the simple solution is Prometheus. They've got the Kubernetes kind of stuff that you can use. Kind of, there are some Helm charts and stuff that will give you some good metrics. There's nice Grafana dashboards to look at the clusters themselves. But I mean, even that is confusing. And I did see a talk not long ago, I think, from someone at Metrics talking about Kubernetes itself producing well over 600 metrics. So you're always kind of making a decision on which ones you're going to use, which ones you're not going to use. And I think this is kind of part of the complexity of kind of the monitoring and observability world, right? There is no right answer. There are plenty of wrong ones, but there isn't, or less correct ones, we'll say, but not really a right one. So yeah, if you just want metrics for the KS clusters themselves, I would go with the Prometheus stuff, maybe a Grafana dashboard, and then go with the logs themselves. My preference will always be a SaaS vendor for logs. To be honest, I've seen companies run their own. I've seen companies, and I've done both, and it's a lot less hassle to give it to someone else who does that for a day job. So but that's specific to the KX clusters, as I said.
I don't know whether you know much about it. I'm not a good person to answer this. Are you aware of some self-hosted, I guess, WireGuard was supposed, VPN services? That's not really my domain. I'm not sure whether you, Ivan, know or...
Not myself specifically, I'm afraid, no. Not a VPN expert.
The perfectly valid answer is I have no idea. I mean, at least that's mine. I mean, the one that I used actually that served me well is, what was the name? Twingate. Okay. So, Praven, try Twingate, but I'm not an expert, so don't take this as a recommendation. Okay, let's go for the next one from Gurav. And if I butcher somebody's names, sorry for that. Hey guys, thanks for AMA. Thank you for thanking us. Not sure if this fits the session. Let me ask anyway. I want to learn Golang language, but getting overwhelmed. Resources, etc. How should I learn Golang? You write Golang, right?
My company does. I do not. Okay. I'm afraid. I've always been on the operation side. I've always been on that. I've written some code, but generally mine's limited to Python, to be honest. So,
Yeah. I mean, I've wrote my shared amount of Go code, and I cannot really answer the question because I feel that the answer is not really how to learn a specific language, but learn how to write code. And I don't have specific resources since it was many, many years ago, right? But once you learn how to program for real, right? Switching from one language to another is... I never went through any tutorial for Golang. You just kind of, hey, look at the code, you know how the code works, find what are the differences, figure it out, contribute to open source.
Yeah, I was just going to say the only way I've ever learned. I mean, I'm a terrible developer, so maybe a bad example. But my only way to learn it is to actually, have some useful application to do it, right? So whenever I've learned to do stuff, it's always kind of, I have a clear goal, an outcome that I want to achieve. Let's learn how to achieve that, right? That's certainly been the way that I've done it successfully in the past.
Okay, next from Adam, Grafana Loki for collecting logs, cool, or Elastic Stack? Do you have because if I answer the Elastic part, it's not going to be pretty.
Okay. I honestly, I will always say in any of these debates, right? You can, so I always used to say to people when I was kind of, running a team that owned all of the monitoring tools and things, like we can take the best tool in the world and deliver it really badly and no one will use it. And we can take the worst tool in the world and deliver it really well and everyone will use it. I think, whenever you're looking at these things, look at the way that it will work for your organization and look at how you're actually going to get people to consume it in your organization. And whichever one fits the patterns that you have for the way that your developers and everyone work is the right answer. I've used both with great success. So think about that. That's to me, it's far more important about how people are using it and stuff and making it work for you than it is on this tool versus that tool, because it's possible to do brilliant things or terrible things with both.
What I would say, without answering that question directly, the choice one might need to make is whether to use one. I'm talking about storages now, right? Rather than how you visualize it. Whether you want to use one tool to store all types of data, because logs are not the same as metrics, which are not the same as traces, or to use different tools. And I hate this answer, but there is no good answer to that question, because one tool is easier to manage than three, but might be less efficient, right? And then there are... Exactly.
It also depends, as I was going to say. I mean, if you're using Prometheus elsewhere, then maybe having the Loki query language, which is kind of PromQL-like, makes more sense, right? I mean, if you've got people that have used Elastic a lot in the past, and that's like the majority of your user base, then maybe it makes sense to go, with Elastic. as I said, I've used both. And I've had great success. I've had some really good Elastic managed vendors and everything before, and found them brilliant. So yeah, just think about how you want to use it and stuff. So yeah, that's a bit of a cop-out answer, but I genuinely believe it's the right one, I'm afraid. So yeah.
Okay, from Shadow Slayer, how is Kubernetes job market prospect? Well, I mean, my impression is that big guys are firing and small guys are hiring currently, and that I don't see people being unemployed. I'm not sure what's your take, Ivan.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I think the job market in general in the IT world seems to be a lot better than it was maybe 6 months ago or a year or so ago. So yeah, I think that's certainly getting better. And in terms of Kubernetes specifically, I think it's still very much on the up. I think kind of when I first started kind of using Kubernetes to get into space a few years ago, it very much felt like lots of people were talking about it, but actually only very few were using it or using it well. But right now, at the moment, it does seem to be much more like everyone is using it to some degree. So I think it's here to stay.
Yeah, I don't think that there is a company today, respectful company, or I don't know how to define it, that is not using Kubernetes today. The question is to me more, okay, it's not whether somebody is using, some companies using Kubernetes, but whether they're using it for 1% of their workloads or 99% of the workloads. That, to me, that's the only question. How far did you get? We're not asking anymore the question from 3 years ago, should you use Kubernetes or not? I think that's done. Lucian, unless Ivan knows, I have no idea how to prepare any course. I haven't been doing exams in courses for a long time. I don't know. Ivan, have you done any course?
No, so I'm afraid not.
I feel that courses are very useful early on, and then once you have 10 years, 20 years of experience, it becomes out of the radar, at least mine.
Yeah.
Okay, now this we might be able to. Can you share some light on data format for tracing and any advantage of one over other?
Yeah. So I mean, when I first started doing tracing, every kind of company had its own proprietary standard, and that was all in the their agents and everything that did it all kind of automatically and everything else like that. And then we've got kind of open tracing and sensors and everything else like that. But now, there is one big standard data format, I guess, for tracing, and that's OpenTelemetry. And I would suggest we don't really need to go into too much details about any other, but beyond this point, because it's very much becoming the number one kind of format. So they've got the OTLP specifications for how the schema for a trace, as well as a log and a metric. And these are now quickly becoming adopted as the kind of the open source standard format for all of these three data types, and are getting a lot of vendor buy-in. So if I was you, if you was looking at, how should we generate logs in our company, I would have a look, a big hard look at what the open telemetry schema is for logs. And similarly, if you're going to look at tracing, make sure that whatever you're doing is open tracing compatible. And similarly for metrics as well.
I feel that also, if on the other hand, if you're into looking which tools, where you're going to store those data. If it's not supporting OpenTelemetry, I think that should be a big red flag, kind of like, don't go there.
Yeah, and I would use the OpenTelemetry collector if you can, and libraries to generate those traces with the ability, knowing that it gives you much greater ability to evaluate several of those backends at the same time. You can generate the traces once and send the same trace to different backends for evaluation, but also you can switch between those vendors much more easily as well. So yeah, open tracing. I'm sorry, open telemetry version of tracing. I keep saying open tracing, but I mean open telemetry. Tracing.
There was open tracing before, right?
There was
merged into open
yes,
telemetry,
yes.
So you're excused.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, how do I tackle auto scaling with Java backends running on 16 cores each pod with an edge proxy? I'm not even sure that the answer to this question is directly related to Java, right? It's figuring out whether you can scale horizontally or vertically, and unfortunately, you cannot scale both today effectively. If it's I don't know what you think about what I'm going to say, Ivan, but my simple rule is if your application doesn't keep state in itself, scale horizontally, just define what is your limit and that's where I think that this connects well back to the previous answers is why Prometheus, and whenever people ask me why Prometheus, my answer is simple. It's not whether it's better or worse than anything else, but it's supported by everything, right?
Yeah.
That's probably the first tool that any other tool will support. And horizontal pod autoscaler or anything you choose to scale is going to look for Prometheus data to make those decisions.
Yeah. I mean, to bring it back to kind of an observability slant, just I think the number one thing that I would do if I was looking at this is trying to work out, in what way is my application limited? What are the key metrics that I'm going to be using for my auto scaling to trigger, something? Because particularly with Java, can take a little bit of time to get started, so you might want to have a little bit of sensitive, I guess, to load and stuff, and just make sure that you're clear over what circumstances you're going to be scaling and what metrics are going to be driving those.
Okay, this is, I guess, more of a comment than a question. I use Loki and FluentD. Great. Thinking of moving to Victoria Logs. Great as well. Victoria is Victoria. No, Victoria Logs I haven't tried. I tried the Victoria Metrics. Metrics is good.
It's very, very new and very kind of CLI kind of focused and stuff. It looks very cool. But you're going to be working more on your terminal as opposed to maybe a UI, or certainly the bits that I've seen were more like that. So if that works for the way that your SREs or engineers or anything are working, then it makes a lot of sense.
From Lauren, I'm trying to set up DevOps process observability dashboard, which includes stuff like CI/CD pipelines, commits, etc. What's the simplest solution for that? I'm starting from scratch, so no fixed problem. Is this OpenTelemetry answer again?
The first thing is to work out, well, what I would suggest when creating any dashboard is, before you even create the dashboard, is think of the story that you're going to tell with the dashboard. I think there are certainly I've seen and had to be go through in some previous companies where we've been in a situation of having hundreds and hundreds of dashboards. No one really knows which one is which and everything else. So make sure that there is a purpose to it and that it has a clear audience and they have a story that they're trying to tell with it, or an answer that they're trying to get from it, because that actually gives the dashboard purpose. Don't just put metrics up there for the sake of having a dashboard. Would be my number one advice when creating a dashboard and stuff like that. If you actually come down to what simple solution and stuff like that, there are a number of great tools in the kind of dashboarding space. You've got obviously things like Grafana. You've got kind of Squared Up. You've got there are lots and lots of tools out there that do a really good job of visualizing things pretty well, and can plug into all manner of data sources. Just make sure before you do that, why you're actually generating that dashboard.
The only thing I would add is that I feel that one of the mistakes we've been making is making dashboards that serve everyone. And I feel that fails big time, right? The dashboard that sysadmin or SRE or DevOps or whatever we call those roles is going to look at shouldn't be the same as developer, right? You're going to overwhelm people. If you overwhelm people with data that they don't need but you do, you're going to have a negative effect. They're not going to use it, right? And then it's going to be up to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, more Java. How do you handle auto-scaling with Java backends as their lazy loading behavior trashes initial traffic during auto-scaling? Everything is in Kubernetes with each pod allocated 16 cores. So if you have terrible startup time, right? Scaling shouldn't be a problem as long as you know when to scale and you never scale to zero. Right? You cannot scale to zero because it takes time until it starts up. But if you have one real replica and you scale it, and I'm inventing now, when it reaches 80% threshold or whatever you're measuring, right? You still have those 20% buffer until a new replica kicks in and takes over half of the traffic or whatever you're doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing I can think of in this is to delay the actual, auto scale out and then delay actually bringing that new auto scaled instance into service, right? If you maybe send you some kind of dummy request or anything, right? Because that's the only way. I mean, you're right. Certainly, I said banking background, spent a lot of time with Java, and when it first starts, it does. Every request does run slow. So unless you have a way to generate maybe some dummy requests to get it kind of warmed up or anything, then that's kind of part of the problem, I'm afraid. But yeah, that's the only thing I can think of.
That is something that I feel that many are missing. The importance of assuming if you're using Kubernetes, it actually says everything is in Kubernetes, right? The importance of creating really good health checks, because Kubernetes will scale up, and then depending on what you tell it, it will start sending traffic to that thing, and that might be too early, right? You can start sending traffic while your application is not yet fully
maybe
running.
Maybe an application metric that isn't just like a 200 okay from picking the base page, right? Being a bit more application specific is kind of what we're saying here. So maybe actually wait till you can send through an actual kind of proper request or something that works before you send traffic that way.
So I don't know whether you have opinion on this. Essentially, this question boils down: Jaeger or Grafana Tempo?
Well, yeah. I mean, either way, yes, you've got it there, and using open telemetry, and that is the number one thing I would say. Beyond that, I'm kind of probably going to again defer to my previous kind of question with all of these things. I think honestly, either are good. Had some success, with both. There are many companies who can, many examples of companies doing great things with both. Have a look at them. They both have their different strengths and weaknesses. If you're using the rest of the LGTM stack, then I would say, stick with what you know in Grafana world. If you're not, and you've got, another kind of a collection of tools, maybe Jaeger works best for you, but they both have their own strengths and weaknesses, and I would kind of look at what actually works for the way that your company is working themselves. So if you want just to kind of quickly touch on that, as I said, like Grafana Tempo comes in a great ecosystem with all of the other Grafana tools and things. Jaeger was it's really good to run very quickly locally, for some immediate kind of testing and everything else like that I've had lots of fun playing around with. So think about the way that your company or your organization works and develops things, and which one works best for that. As I said, a bit of a cop-out answer, but it's genuinely I believe the best way to go.
And on top of that is that thanks to OpenTelemetry, those questions, or to be more precise, making a mistake is not so critical, because I always tend to look, we need to make as good of a choice as possible when we expect investment, right? Instrumenting your applications, that's investment, right? One way or another. Collecting things in one place or another, that's a much easier switch. And that's where OpenTelemetry comes in, right? If it would be proprietary, then the answer couldn't be, hey, try one, and if you don't like it, go to another. After half a year of investment, right? Writing all the traces for that specific tool. But now it's OpenTelemetry, right? You can change within a day.
Yeah. Yeah, if this is for a company, for an organization, whenever you're rolling out a new tool, I would strongly suggest having a small group of users, that kind of power users that you can work with to build this out. And I think, as you say, with open telemetry now, OTel, as we kind of call it for short, you can quite literally very simply run both of them alongside each other with little effort and evaluate both alongside each other, and get your your early adopters, as I would always call them, looking at both and seeing which one comes out the best, because ultimately it's about, people using it. That is the most important thing. So if people have a strong preference for one, even if you don't like it, then that's the one you should go with, because you need people to use it, right? So
now we have a question that I'm not sure how to answer, because I don't use Lambda myself much.
okay.
What I can say is that one of the reasons why I don't use Lambda much is because I don't want to depend on something that is so heavily biased. I don't know if I can say that. I don't know. Do you have any experience with Lambda?
In my previous job, I loved Lambda.
Oh, sorry, man.
It was well, I think partly is as well because I could run kind of stuff that would run, production type stuff that I could write in Python, which, as I said, is my limit in terms of my my kind of programming capabilities. The thing about Lambda and kind of all kind of serverless stuff, right, is that it's not permanent. And for that case, the most important thing is to push that data away from the runtime thing as quickly as possible. In my past job, we had great success building a logging library, where we would say to people that we provided to them as a what's it called now? I still haven't done it for a while, but not like a class or whatever, but with a Lambda layer. That's what I'm looking for. So we provided essentially like a Lambda layer that was a logging library, and people could just bring that into their Lambda project and then very simply build up logs. And then that would ship them off to, we ran a service that was pretty simply just like some couple of EC2s with Fluent D collectors on them, that had an HTTP endpoint or UDP endpoint that would that you could send to, and so we would just ship everything off and then do all kind of formatting, everything else like that, on our kind of centralized service, and then we generate metrics from the logs and everything else like that. So yeah, I think from my personal experience, a lot of success with logs allows you to do kind of just get them off as quickly as possible. And yeah, that's my my suggestion. And then again, kind of your logging tool of choice. And if you want to, again, you can run the Open Telemetry collector. I think that does have an endpoint that you can send the logs to, and then you can do all the formatting and everything else and send them to whichever tool you want. And similarly for metrics. So yeah. Have a look.
And I feel that this question also builds on one of the previous ones about CI/CDs, and probably it's valid to mention that some observability storages will try to pool the data, right? Which works pretty well for long-running applications. But if you have a Lambda or pipelines, for example, or anything else that just runs for a while and then disappears, that model fails miserably, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting to see that like Prometheus, which is traditionally a pull method, now accepts the the OTLP, the Open Telemetry push. So you can use the Open Telemetry SDKs. In terms of metrics, I'm going to be biased. I work on an open source, I've been involved in an open source, Open Telemetry based metric library called Autometrics. So I would strongly suggest having a look at that. It's a nice way to push out some metrics to wherever you want. But yeah, there are a number of ways, but yeah.
Okay, now from Andrews. I never compared in terms of performance and robustness Prometheus, Fluent Bit, and
I think it's supposed to be Fluent D and Fluent Bit.
Fluent D and Fluent, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any experience. What is more performant? I guess that's probably the meaning behind robust.
Yeah, I mean, Fluent D is famously heavy. That's what I will say. I have previously used Fluently, and if you're looking for something kind of lightweight and stuff, FluentBit is pretty good. That's probably my choice of those three for the kind of that use case described there.
Let's see, what else do we have? Okay, from Raj, Raj. I'll go with Raj, and you correct me. Hey, Victor and Ivan, thanks for the session. This helps a lot. What CI/CD you suggest to learn to get a job? I'm very biased here. I like the one that I don't need to manage GitHub Actions, kind of. To me, that's
Yeah.
I feel, I don't know how you feel about it. I feel that CI/CD became commodity, that almost all the tools are doing the same.
Yeah.
And then if I have no real advantage one or the other, then the one that I need to work least with sounds like the best option.
Yeah. I think, again, with all this stuff is, what I would do is, just pick one and use it and, build some kind of real use cases on it, actually, play around with one and get you to grips with it, because, you're right. The skills are transferable from one to the other, so actually have the experience of using it.
One thing that, now that you mention it, I feel is important. At least that's the way I worked with pipelines is, or the way I observe that I believe people do approach wrongly, is to use pipelines as a way to write their automation. And I always felt that automation should be written independently of any of those pipelines. Write your shell scripts.
Yeah.
Write your commands shell scripts, and you automate completely ignoring the existence of Jenkins and GitHub Actions and all those times and things, and then you try to stitch it.
Yeah.
Put it all together rather than, let me write DSL of this tool in a way.
Yeah. I think there were different use cases. I think, like I've had some where, kind of, for me, a pipeline and stuff, the benefit is the kind of, you can have it kind of, a user kind of initiated thing. So for my old team, and we had an action that, we wanted to make our, other teams more self-service. It was really great for us to be able to write a pipeline. And when someone came to us and said they want to do this thing, it was like, no, go and run that pipeline. You have access. It will do the thing for you. Wonderful. Love them. So I think that's, which probably is, you're right, isn't full automation, which is where you do want to just write a script and stuff. I think with all of these tooling kind of questions of this one versus that one, particularly in terms of hiring and stuff, what I would say is, when, I've been hiring engineers in the past, the one thing I don't look as much at is, what specific tool do they have experience in? What I'm more interested in is how they solve the problems. And so having the experience of solving the problems is more important than having the experience of a specific tool. And so this is why I do kind of keep saying, use one, have a project that you're working on, implement CI/CD, even if it is maybe overkill for your project, to get that learning experience, to actually use it, to come across some common gotchas, to overcome those problems, to, build your way of thinking and everything else like that, and problem solving, which is far more important than having knowledge of any specific tool.
Exactly. And I'm guessing that I'm just going to use you as example, right? If you would be looking for somebody that has, let's say, experience with tracing, right? And that somebody has 3 years of experience with tracing with Jaeger, and you happen to use Tempo, that would probably be a significant criteria, right?
Exactly right. I mean, we're still talking about the same kind of concepts of, kind of having a unique ID for, a request and tracing it through the different steps. And if they've understood that and they've kind of dealt with, maybe sampling issues and all this kind of stuff, then they've dealt with the problems that we would face, right? So whether they've got this tool or that tool or this language or that language, to me, is less important, right? We can teach people the specific tools and skills.
I have to open the door, so I will let you answer if you know the next question.
Okay. I have heard that VPA. I'm not sure I have an answer, really, which is rather unfortunate, because obviously Victor is just opening the door. So I couldn't tell you, I'm afraid. So bad one to ask while you were away, Victor. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
know
I
to be
haven't
honest.
used Java for many years. So what I don't know is whether, so I'm guessing it shouldn't have problems, right? Oh, it might have problems in the near future. So when you use VPA, VPA will essentially change the resources of a pod, and that will result in that pod being shut down and new one being created, right? That will change soon. But right now, that's how it works. And I guess if your Java does not have any hard-coded values and say, I need to work with this amount of memory, I'm guessing now, right? It should work. And assuming that your application knows how to shut down gracefully. Right? But I'm not sure how much that is related to JVM directly. Now, what will happen in the future is that there will be the option, and I'm not sure which release of Kubernetes that comes in, there will be an option to actually resize pods without restarting them. And then you might have more problems because JVM might be thinking that it's still running in a old-sized pods. But I'm guessing. I have no idea. I'm not using JVM. I don't know. Okay. What is which notifier? I guess we're talking about alerting service I could use. My experience there is limited as well. So I used Robusta for notifications.
Okay.
You can try that one. Prometheus comes with. I know I could use which supports webhooks. So I'm not sure what actually this question means, right?
That's my kind of thing. Is I'm not sure which ones support webhooks, to be honest.
No idea.
For someone, I mean, I've generally used whichever kind of one it comes with the cloud service that I'm using. If in terms of that's the general answer, and they will probably accept the events generated within that cloud service. I wouldn't overcomplicate it, to be honest. Go with whichever one just kind of works and comes involved with your cloud service. Yeah. That's the way I've done it previously. But
if you want to go fancy really and kind of spend a lot of time setting it up, you might want to try Argo events, and then basically you send a webhook to Argo events and you figure out what to do with that event and where to send it further, if that helps. Yeah. But that would be probably more in case when you need to transform it, right? If the destination accepts HTTP requests, there is nothing to do. It's just webhook sends there and that's it. The problem is when you need to, I don't know, maybe that webhook should end up as an event in Kafka, and then you need something in between.
Yeah.
Okay. How to keep up learning all the tools, as each tool is a huge hard to learn deep. I completely disagree with that statement, but I'll let you answer first, Ivan, if you have anything.
I think there are, I think certainly in the observability space, there are a couple of tools, or one tool specifically that stands out as kind of something that you probably want to learn, and that's kind of Prometheus. It is, such a kind of important tool, particularly in the Kubernetes space. As I said, learning some basic PromQL and stuff is very handy. Beyond that, again, I wouldn't try and learn every tool. It's a simple answer. I wouldn't try and learn every tool. I would try and keep it simple and make sure that a logging tool, a metric tool, a tracing tool, that open telemetry, how the collector works. Maybe you've had a go at instrumenting some services, and so you've kind of got the basics from beginning to end, from code and instrumentation through to actually viewing traces, and you understand the kind of basic data concepts. Beyond that, you're never going to know it every tool, and this space particularly has become hugely popular over the last few years, and every day there is a new tool. I certainly can't keep up with them, so yeah.
I think that also the important part here is that we almost never get tools that are completely out of the blue, something completely different, never seen before. That does not happen, right? So when a new tool comes, how hard it is to learn or know often depends on the prior experience, right?
Yeah.
Like you've been working with observability. I'm pretty sure if I give you some new tool you never saw before, it's going to be very similar to whatever you used.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, get a good foundation in one or two of them, and you should find that they're pretty transferable to all, really.
This one, I don't know why. I know that that's the case. Why the reclaim policy of the storage class cannot be changed after creating persistent volume? I have no idea. Why? I can only guess that. Why? Because storage is a physical thing that you cannot change willy-nilly. But I have no answer. I don't know if you even know anything about it.
Nope.
How should I request salary increase in my company?
Yeah.
By threatening to quit.
Yeah, I mean that's one approach. Carefully, I would suggest. I think it very much depends on your situation. Really, I don't know. I can say much more than that.
I mean, a sneaky way, horrible way, a way that every single vendor, and I work for a vendor, will hate, and but works is get an offer from somebody else.
Yeah.
And then say this is what they're offering me. What do you say?
Yeah.
I just realized I said it in public, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is interesting actually. What is your view on creating metrics from logs?
So I think so. I've done it in the past and I've had some success with it. I think there's nothing wrong with it as long as you don't overuse it. Part of the benefit of metrics is that they are much cheaper than logs to generate in terms of storage, querying, everything else like that. So if I had the choice, I would always much rather have a native metric than a metric generated from a log. But as I said in the serverless question, I had a lot of success with helping teams, kind of use a kind of event-based logging. So every invocation of their Lambda function was one log entry, and it included all of the event data, and that was super powerful. And they had all this kind of stuff, all this information on all of their Lambda invocations, and actually being able to generate the number of non-200 responses, for example, as a metric was great, and we weren't going to generate the metric as well as the log that we'd already generated. It was simpler to do that on the data side off the Lambda function for obvious reasons. So yeah, I wouldn't want to do it for everything. I would much rather have a native metric solution, but I wouldn't kind of turn my head at it and think it's a terrible idea. Again, as long as there's a right reason to do it, then great, go do it.
Would you in those situations where you have logs, you have to deal with it, right? Would you query logs for metrics, or would you transform logs and store them as metrics and then query?
Yeah. So I mean, there were two. Either is good, and depends on the use case, right? So if you have some kind of maybe some kind of reporting or something that you're doing, so maybe you want to track your SLOs and you've only got log responses, then actually you would want to kind of, as you're generating the log data, be turning that into metrics and generating an actual fully fledged metric from it. And that is one type of metric. And again, that's fine. That's great. He said sometimes you only have access to logs, or you have in a company where your developers are, very okay with generating logs, but don't want to go in and, instrument their code to generate metrics. And that might be why you do it. And you want to get some SLOs. So you would do it and you would generate a fully fledged metric from a log. But then there are other cases whereby you do just want to say, okay, how many invocations of this have I had in the last hour? And then essentially you're getting a metric response there. Oh, look, I've got 55. but that is a kind of an instant metric. So I don't really have a problem with any of these. I think one of the benefits, again, I think, of working in the observability space is there isn't really any kind of right answers or really seriously wrong answers. The answer is pretty much always it depends. So yeah, don't get too tied to these principles that people are talking about. You don't absolutely need 3 pillars to have observability. There aren't these things that you have to do to have good observability. You need to do what's right for you, your company, the way you work, your architecture choices, and everything else like that.
How to scale Prometheus?
Ask someone else to do it.
I love that answer. But the way I understood, I don't know whether something changed, but you cannot scale Prometheus. It cannot run in a replicated mode, right? You need something like Victorian metrics or something like that.
Yeah.
But also, I don't know your experience, but sometimes also companies go crazy with the duration of metrics, right? Kind of, we're going to store a full year of very granular metrics.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Again, with that, I think you'll find that. So again, I've had this argument many times. We need to store data for 6 months as a minimum, all of our logs, everything, and the answer is you almost certainly don't. I mean, there are some kind of regulatory reasons that I've come across for some things, but beyond that, you almost certainly don't. You don't need to store your data that long. Again, I have built reporting processes where we've taken data out and kept it in a separate metric store specifically for reporting purposes, and that is to do trending stuff. So one of them was for capacity. So we did want kind of a lower granularity, but a higher kind of a longer a larger amount of data over time because we were trending, looking at trends. And again, reporting, regulatory reporting and stuff. Those are the kind of situations where I've seen it, but that was a very small subset of data that we took out. But yeah, Prometheus famously, as it's kind of part of the decision, the design choices is hard to scale. There are some companies out there that are Prometheus compatible. You mentioned it, Victorian Metrics, Chronosphere. There's lots of companies out there that are doing this thing. You know what? Unless you're working for those companies, your core business is not scaling Prometheus. So let someone who does do it as their core business do it, because they'll inevitably do it better than you will, to be honest.
Exactly. Okay, now we have next question is in 2 pieces. For someone wanting to deploy for the first time in Java, Python, distributed applications, is cost effective to deploy. Is it cost effective to deploy with Kubernetes using some of the well-known services like GKE, I guess, and AKS? And then it goes, cloud-based services using Kubernetes and hoping to scale distributed apps and as requests grow.
I would say, based on what I've literally just said about kind of scaling Prometheus and stuff, I would say yes. So we've used kind of EKS and really like it. There's some benefits to letting someone else run the overall Kubernetes platform and letting you be use it with highly effectively. I think there is benefits to doing that, and it probably does come in terms of cost effectiveness. I haven't looked at the actual prices. I don't know if you have, Victor.
No, haven't the prices, but it also depends on the volume, right? I would say that Kubernetes can be very cost effective after a certain scale, right? But if you, for example, have 1 or 2 applications, just go for Google Cloud Run, Lambda, or anything like that. They're more expensive per CPU second or whatever we calculate, but not if you're going to run a Kubernetes cluster for 1 or 2 applications, that's not cost effective. I'm not sure how many applications that person is running, but if it's 1 or 2, it said someone wanting to deploy for the first time. I'm assuming we're not talking about large system.
Yeah.
Okay, so next one. We're getting non-observability questions, Ivan. That's the nature of the game. What is the most secure and efficient method for distributing Kubernetes secrets among team members to assure their safe and confidential sharing? Before I let you answer, I will say that the safest is not to distribute it among team members.
Yeah. I mean, don't use Kubernetes secrets. Is the first thing. You're going to need some external vault, aren't you? As to there's quite a few kind of things out there. Again, most cloud offerings have their own one. There is a few others from HashiCorp have one famously that I've used previously to great success. But be careful who you give that access to, and maybe again consider not giving each individual access. But there's a few ways to do this.
If you exclude few special people, admins, stuff like that, very often if you do it right, you don't need to distribute secrets to any humans, right? You have tools, you have Terraform. I work with Crossplane. You have dashboards. You can see everything and do everything you need to do in certain way, or GitOps, let's say, right? Without ever having access to AWS or Kubernetes cluster or anything like that, unless you're a special person, break glass situation.
That's exactly what I was going to follow up with. Consider you building some kind of automation, some pipelines or something like that mean that you don't have to share these secrets, and they're actually kind of in that form, because it's an awful lot safer than actually giving people access to these things.
Okay, Babil, seems that our stream is not working well for him or everybody. I don't know. Ask YouTube. I don't know. What is the role of Mimir? Do you know what is Mimir?
So it's like a metric store.
Okay.
So it's for time series stuff. So you've got Loki for logs, Tempo for traces, and then you've got Grafana obviously as a visualization tool, and then you've got Mimir as the metrics time series database.
Replacement for Kubernetes, for Prometheus in a way, right? If I understood right.
I think you can do like remote writes and things.
Okay. If you're building a fresh stack today that needed to provide logs, traces, and events, what technologies would you use to make? I guess this is what we answered already, right?
Open telemetry. Open telemetry instrumentation, open telemetry collector. Again, as I said, for me, I would use Autometrics as my open source thing because I'm biased, because that's an open source library that I've been working with, just to reduce thinking about what you actually need to instrument and stuff. But in general, open telemetry. Make sure everything's open telemetry, and then choose your back end of choice, really.
Okay, this is interesting. What I have studied is that Grafana agent and Prometheus pull metrics and logs as well. So do we require Prometheus? And I feel that it's pulling, but it needs to pull from somewhere.
And also it needs to store stuff somewhere as well. Don't forget that Prometheus does allow you to visualize metrics and things, but at the kind of basic level, I would almost just consider it as like a metric kind of data store. So yes, Prometheus pulls metrics, and also Grafana agent and Prometheus can pull them. But if you're going to use the Grafana stack, then you would store them in Mimir, and then you wouldn't need Prometheus. But if you're using Prometheus, then you need to store those metrics somewhere. So think of Prometheus as kind of like a data store in that kind of thing. So although you can use other tools to pull metrics, you still need to kind of pull them into somewhere, and that is quite often Prometheus.
Okay, let's do one more. I followed one article and set up, I think that this is continuation of the previous one from Grafana Labs, and they set up Loki using Grafana agent. If Grafana agent is not time series, then how it is sending metrics to Loki?
Yeah,
Is that the
Loki
story of you pulling metrics from logs from before?
Yes, I was going to say this is it, right? Because Loki is the logs, kind of back end here in the LGTM stack. So you can absolutely generate metrics based on data that is stored in Loki. But what you would be doing is you would be running queries over your logs that output that have a metric output. But it's actually pulling logs and pushing those into Loki.
So we are 5 minutes away from the end. And there is a bunch of other questions. We are not going to be able to go through them, and then in a moment of we cannot do it. Why don't we spend the last 5 minutes going through what you're doing, Ivan? What's Fiberplane? What you were telling me about an open source project as well, and so on and so forth. So go for it.
Yeah, okay. So I've mentioned it a couple of times. So a completely open source project called Autometrics. Fiberplane, we do collaborative notebooks for SREs, other types of engineers to help you all collaborate on running an incident, actually who's running queries and everything, and bring everyone into one space to work on those incidents together and make it easier to write postmortems. Super cool technology with kind of like lots of collaboration, kind of like Google Docs or Notion style things to allow everyone in one place to do it. But what we discovered is that quite a few companies aren't really are struggling to kind of instrument their applications themselves in the first place and generate good data. And this whole as we've seen today from all the questions, right? Monitoring observability is hard. It's hard to get right, and it is kind of lots of domain specific knowledge that's required, right? And actually to get really good at it in terms of what should I instrument within my code base, and what should I name my metrics or anything else like that. Then how do I store them? Where do I store them? How do I query that data? Is the data that I've been returned even very useful to me? Do I understand it? So lots of actual kind of problems that come up in the space. So we've been working a lot on this Autometrics library. So it comes in, can't remember now, 5 languages, I think, because we've had a couple of new additions recently. So certainly Go, Rust, Python, JavaScript. I think there's C#, and I think there's recently a Java version that's been added as well. And what that will do is it will provide you with function-based metrics. And I think that's quite an interesting thing. So when I say function-based metrics, what I mean is you decorate functions in your code. There is recently I've seen some work to kind of automate some of that as well, if you've got like a large existing code base. But what it's doing is it's creating function-based metrics. So for every function invocation in your application, you will get the number of invocations, the number of errors within those invocations, and the latency distribution for those invocations, right? And I think for me, this is really, really important because I've spent a large amount of time in my career kind of getting people to, instrument their code properly, to care about it and everything else. And it's difficult when there isn't a great deal of value that is perceived by people kind of early on in the, software development lifecycle. They're kind of, we talked about this kind of, shift left in the DevOps world, right? Where, people were going to do things much earlier on, but there needs to be value for people in order for them to do that, right? So having this kind of function-based metrics that actually make sense to developers, that they can look at a metric and go, I know what that means, and it makes sense to me in terms of my code base and what I see in the IDE, is a really powerful concept. So that's kind of what I'm up to, and kind of helping some of the people that I work with as well build out some of these concepts and these ideas, and just generally trying to make metrics and all of this data that we have useful, right? Because let's not forget that generating huge amounts of data, as we were kind of saying just beforehand, this started, that is quite literally just a cost activity for your company, right? If you can't use all the data that is generated, then you're just costing your company money. And actually, the only value is being able to, take, good actions and and insights from the data. So really just trying to focus on that. So Autometrics, check it out.
Okay, that's it for today. Bunch of questions. We're going to have a session next week, same day, Thursday, talking about functions and platforms and whatever else. And so with Maurizio, so see you all next week. Thank you, Ivan, for, am I pronouncing? It's not Ivan? Ivan?
To
Sorry.
me, it doesn't really matter to me. It differs wherever I am in the world. So yeah, it's all good.
See you all next time. Cheers.
Thanks.